Yeah, this is me. I am a maker of interactive fiction games. By day, I work for a company called Kythera AI. Um, and I have made a language and a development system for that language called Gruescript. It's fortunate that I've come on after John because John's actually explained everything that is terrible about languages like Gruescript, but that's okay because this is a language designed for making a particular kind of game, which I'm going to call the Puzzlebox game, which I'll get to defining in a minute. Some caveats: this is in beta at the moment. I've ironed out most of the bugs, but there's always more. I'm aiming mainly at the sort of hobbyist interactive fiction crowd. It could possibly be used for prototyping. I think it would be nice for laying out your geography, checking puzzle dependencies. So I don't know how much of this needs explained, but I'm going to start with a bit of context. So interactive fiction can be broadly divided into parser games and choice games. Parser games are probably what people think of outside of interactive fiction culture as the old text games. They're arbitrarily cruel. This on the left is Infocom's Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, in which you're being killed for standing up. Um, choice games. This is one of John's company's games, 80 Days. Um, Much more story focused, tend to look a lot nicer. So I'll go through this quickly. And parser games are the ones where you type go north, get lamp. They tend to have a lot of simulationism. The game knows how the rooms are connected geographically. It knows which objects are in which rules. The player can pick up objects arbitrarily and move them about. The game will remember things like that. In a choice-based game, that's generally not what the author or the player is thinking about. So there's a bit of state, but it's generally quite light. It's used for things like what other characters think of your player character, and you interact with it through clicking buttons or links. Um, Parser games had a commercial heyday in the 80s. There have been a few commercial attempts recently. As far as I know, none of them have gone very well, but there's still quite an active hobbyist subculture. Choice games, on the other hand, I think more or less started as a hobbyist subculture in about 2010. There was the Twine revolution. Twine got a lot of people, made a lot of people able to design games, which is awesome, and has had a commercial takeoff in the last 10 years or so. So in a parser game, I think the key difference as the player is that most of your interactions with the game are low level. They're things like picking up objects, moving between rooms, occasionally doing some verb out of left field. Um, in a choice game, your interactions are, do I date this guy? Do I go to the party or do I go home? They're the kind of decisions that you're interested in a protagonist in a story making. So parser games tend to be the ones that are optimized for puzzles. So if you're writing a parser game, at least of the kind that I'm talking about and the kind that I had in mind when I was making Gruescript, you are thinking like a puzzle designer. You're not thinking like an author very much. Most of the descriptions are going to be pretty matter of fact. So that is why I think it is okay. This is very unlike Ink. So the Puzzlebox games I'm going to define as there was a short-lived subgenre of parser games in the early 80s, mainly made by Scott Adams, not to be confused with Dilbert creator and Twitter weirdo Scott Adams. Because they ran on home microcomputers, they had no room for prose at all, even by the standards of text adventures. So a room was a procedurally generated list of the objects in it. And then you had one or two words for a command. And these are remembered fondly because they had excellent puzzle design. So Graham Nelson, the creator of Inform, said that these games gave you the feeling of holding a Chinese puzzle box with exactly cut pieces. So I was trying to play one of these on my phone, and because there's so little writing, they would make really good mobile games, except you have to type. And it's not just that typing on phones is clunky. Typing at a command prompt is not the default way of interacting with computers anymore. So it can be very hard to introduce new players to Parser games. So I wanted to make this Puzzlebox game in a way that was mobile friendly. So what are the advantages of the Parser system that make it good for Puzzlebox games? It's easy for the author to hide things from the player. You don't see... In a choice game, you usually see a finite list of your available choices. In a puzzle game, you need to think of the solution yourself before you see it. So two of the enemies to puzzle design are the railroad and the lawnmower. If you're being railroaded, that means you're just being led by the game from one end of the puzzle to the other. It doesn't feel like you're interacting. Lawnmowering, on the other hand, is going through all your choices one by one, and it just feels like you're exhaustively searching a tree. So I wanted to solve those problems, and I wanted web playability, particularly mobile web playability, which meant no typing. I'm going to mention there have been a few attempts in the past and more recently to sort of solve the puzzle of a parser-like game where you can't type, generally in what I'm calling a verb first type interface. This is clunky. You either have a very small number of verbs or you have a biggish number of verbs here, but it's just ugly, and I don't think it's attractive as a game developer either. I don't think you can surprise the player. So the first game I made before I made Gruescript on these principles, if I can find the window, was called Detective Land, which is so this screen you have, I'll turn the font size up. You have you like the Scott Adams games, your room is just plain list of the room and a list of the things in it. And then each of the nouns has associated verbs. So we can open the filing cabinet, we can take the revolver, and then we have verbs associated with that. So this won the interactive fiction competition. It was the first non-parser game to win that competition. And I think, like a lot of first non-X's to win things, it did so by imitating X as closely as possible. So here is Gruescript itself. It comes with a lot of examples. It's on itch. The best way to find it is to Google. It's also on GitHub. How am I for time? I've got another 10 minutes or so. I thought I would... Well, firstly, I'll show you the interface. On the left, you have the code of your game. This is one of the example games, Cloak of Darkness. And on the right, you have the game itself. So you have a fairly rapid iteration between changing something here and actually playing the game. This is a game where if you take your cloak off and hang it up, you win. It's a very simple game. It's one that's typically used as a sort of test of new languages or a way to show the syntax. So I thought I would very quickly make a little mini game, and John mentioned Alice in Wonderland, so I'm going to do that. So firstly, we declare the game. I believe that's all it's going to need. We'll give it some rooms. Can't remember my own language. How do you start a game? Yeah, that's it. Right. We'll start in the garden. So this, I believe, is a playable game in itself, just not a very good one. I haven't given the garden a room description, so it's made a procedural one, which isn't great. A fuller room description here. So we have rooms, we have things, any object, any character is a thing. A thing called rabbit, we'll put it in the garden. And then we can make a rule. Rules run every turn. So if I just give this a rule, I can say, so a rule consists of a list of assertions and commands. So we'll say if the rabbit is here, we will assign a random number from 1 to 3 to a variable x. Random is basically rolling a dice and putting it in that variable. And then if x happens to be 0, the rabbit will hop. So this assertion is x is not equal to 0. The colon means if this assertion fails, the rule stops, and it prints the message to the right of the colon. So this is a quick way to do. It's never going to be 0. It's going to be 1, 2, or 3. Okay, I can only think of 2 things that a rabbit does, so, and they're actually the same thing. So let's give it 2. So a thing called a rabbit hole in the garden, and we're going to say that this thing always has the verbs enter. So we've now, if we build this, we have a rabbit hole. Entering the rabbit hole isn't going to do anything because I haven't defined that verb. So you can define a verb more generally, like enter, but the easy way here is just going to define it specifically for the rabbit hole. And then go to is a command to move the player. We don't say it, we put its description here. And then this is this the eat me cake or the drink me potion? I can't remember what order this happens in the game. So we have a small tunnel. What I'm trying to show here is it's very easy to lay out the puzzle logically as you think of it. We can flesh out the writing later. So we have a narrow tunnel that is in the bottom of the rabbit hole. That also has the enter verb, but if you try to enter that, you're too big. If we haven't set a variable, likening variables don't need to be initialized here. If they're not initialized, they're assumed to have a value of 0. So we're going to give, but we're not going to use a variable, we're going to use a tag because that's handy. So you can only enter the narrow tunnel if you have eaten the cake. The assertion for that is has cake eaten. We'll see what that means in a minute. So if you have not eaten the cake, this verb fails. You can't do it. Otherwise, we'll go to, I think is it the Wabe? So now we need the cake. So verbs are verbs that an object has all the time. C verbs are verbs that it has when you're carrying it. So we'll give that the C verb eat. And then in order to eat the cake, we define this verb. And then we tag cake eaten. So a thing can be given tags arbitrarily that can then be referred to. Right, we'll see if we can get to the Wabe. Does this work? It does not. Didn't understand has in thing declaration. Oh, it's not a has, sorry, tags. Portable is a special engine recognized tag that means you can pick it up and carry it. There are a few of those, but most tags the author is making up at the time. So that's worked. So I can go into the rabbit hole. If I try and enter the tunnel, I can't fit. I cannot eat the cake because I forgot to actually put the cake anywhere. So I can put the cake in this room, whatever it is, bottom of rabbit hole. Why is it not there? Because I put location in a verb. That makes no sense at all, Robin. I can't do that. Take the cake, eat it, and I've shrunk. And now I'm in the wabe. So as I say, the idea of this, maybe it's the way I think, but I don't think I'm alone. If you're thinking of puzzles, you want to be able to add to them as you go. So the syntax goal of this was, it was for a puzzle setter rather than a writer, I'll admit that. Although I'm also a creative writer, so I'm not completely ignorant of what writers need. But the games that I'm going to make with Gruescript are not going to be amazing prose. They're going to be cool puzzles. My point is you think of the puzzle and you can write the code as you do, as you go. That, I think, has been my 15 minutes. So I'm certainly up for talking about this some more if anyone wants to, or I could take any questions. Is there anything I haven't shown off? I haven't shown the conversation system. I'm going to do that. I'm just going to put him in the garden so that he's there at the beginning. So there's a conversation system, which is basically a switch to a choice-like engine, which a lot of, if I put conversation on, then I believe he has the conversation tag. I don't remember how it works. Okay, yes, I can talk to the Jabberwock. I haven't got anything to ask him about yet. Right, I'm not going to live code a conversation one. I'm going to show you a conversation in one of my examples, but I am going to save this game. Yeah, you can save your code to the browser. It'll save it in a cookie. You can come back to it later. If you just close the window by accident, it'll save what was there, which was a feature I put in after a request from someone who was quite annoyed that they'd nuked their game. So yeah, NPCs. Yeah, so the conversation engine basically a switch to a simple choice model, which works better for conversation than the parser. We know what the parser is good for and what it's not good for, or parser likeness. Cool. That is my time. So thank you for watching me waffle. It was fun, and yeah, I've really enjoyed making this and getting messages from people who are using it, which is amazing. And people are even like fixing bugs and doing pull requests on GitHub, which is great. So if I'm not grossly over time, I could take some questions or I could talk. But thank you all.
Thank you. Yeah, I think we have, we went a little bit over with the last session, so we can also go a little bit over now. We've got a break as buffer. So if anybody has any questions or feedback or comments for Robin, please approach the mic now. Robin, you also might want to keep an eye on the chat in case people are typing anything.
Yes. Yeah, people are thanking me, so thank you. Cool, I'll put myself back on. I'll stop my screen. So yeah, if anyone wants to play with this, the best thing to do is just Google Gruescript, or I will drop it in the chat right now, actually.